Hi guys, today I just wanted to give you a little heads up on my kayak that I've had now for 3 years, and I've been using it extensively. And but before I start into my thoughts of this kayak, let me just emphasize right off the back, I am not affiliated with Aquaglide, and I'm not affiliated with anything that's got to do with this kayak here. I bought it 3 years ago, and I paid top dollar for it, and I had it imported from Australia, which wasn't a very cheap deal, and that's just it. So whatever I have to say about this kayak is all on me, and it's also, I have to emphasize, subjective. That means if I should be saying something that would offend somebody, meaning that they probably think that a hardshell is better or something else, just bear in mind this is me, my kayak, and 3 years of experience. With that out of the way, let me start with the conclusion. So if you don't want the reasons, you can stop here. I love this kayak. It is so fantastic. I mean, when I initially wanted the kayak here, as I mentioned in my previous reviews, it was because I wanted a kayak that was portable. I had no car, and I do not have a car yet. So for me to have a kayak that I could put on my back, put on my motorbike, or in my sidecar, if I really want a lot of gear with me, that works wonders. Now the second thing that was a criteria for me was that it was reliable in terms of if I should bump into rocks, if I should bump into bamboo or something else, I wanted something that I could trust work. Now, but if you go out and look all the reviews on the internet, there will be nobody saying, oh, this one can scrape rocks and it's not a problem, and or this one you can run sideways full force into broken bamboo and it will still hold up, because that's not what you do with a kayak normally, but that's what I do. It is not because I want to abuse my kayak, it's just because I kayak in rivers, I kayak in lakes, I kayak in dams, and I kayak on small, very small rivers, almost creek-like places, where I just don't know what's there. I also use it for recon trips where I don't know what's coming up ahead, and sometimes you just meet shallow water. Now these days, for instance, I've been up in the northeastern part of Chiang Mai area, and I've been exploring a riverside that I've never been to before, and at times it does get shallow. But if you take off the skeg, you're very well off. But to look at how the kayak is holding up, I have to say for 3 years I have had no problem. That is until today. And it is a coincidence that I decided to make this review today, and then today I get a problem. But let me get back to you on that problem in a minute. When I wanted this kayak here, I wanted it because it was a fishing kayak. Not that I was doing much fishing back then, but I wanted it because of the stability, the fact you can stand up in the kayak, and the fact that it holds 600-pound workload. All good. There is no arguing there. Now lately I've also been using a lot for fishing, and obviously when you do fishing and you do inflatable, most people will be a little bit wary about it. I use spinner, I use wobbler, I use a lot of different things, but tri hooks is what I'd use. And sometimes when that snags somewhere and you finally have it off and it just comes bouncing back full throttle, hits the kayak, nothing happens. I'm telling you, this is rock solid. It is a single tube. There's not an inner tube here. It is what it is. But I have run sideways into bamboo in a creek with really fast flowing water. There's nothing. I have to say, when I did that, I was sure it's going to explode. Nothing, not even a scratch. I've had the hooks hitting my kayak many times, not a problem. One thing that does wear down is these plugs here. Obviously, they do not last forever, so they're broken on me. I've just temporarily tied a few knots there. I have to have that replaced. The material here still holds up very good. There's no problem whatsoever. There is no tear or wear on the nose of the kayak. But I also have to say that I do take good care of my kayak, though it might not look like that, but I'm using it in these days, and it's very muddy in these areas. I think you just gotta get this one out. Oh. This here is an extra seat that came along with the kayak. It was part of the whole package. I have not used it much, but lately I found it quite interesting, especially if I'm doing fishing, that I can put it down in underneath my seat and then be elevated a little bit. but it's also a very practical extra seat to bring along with you if you decide at a certain point to go on land and you want to sit dry and good. Well, you got yourself a good extra seat, and it's rock solid like the rest of the kayak. The camera mounts, or the mounts that we have on the kayak here, which is for rod holders, for carb holders, for whatever gear you want to have. It's got 7 of those. It's got one here in the bottom. We already have one of these things mounted. I have used them a little bit. The fittings, the thread inside here, I've not been all too pleased about that. It didn't fit all the time. But at the end of the day, I did not use it much. I did plan on using it on this trip, but I forgot that this was the wrong one to put in, because I needed the one with a knot on it, and then you have the rod holder you can put on there. But that's a detail. The threads, they do work, but some of them are a little bit off. Yeah, and then we gotta look at something else, because some of the things that people, they do concern about it is, what happens if you hit rocks? What if you scrape the bottom? Well, of course, you're not going to go scraping bottom on purpose constantly. That would not be advisable in a kayak this, but you got to remember that you got a very strong material underneath, and on top of that you got yourself a drop stitch floor, and that all together just made it so rigid that there are really no problems. I have been on, let me just get these out here. I have been on many rivers where I scraped the bottom and I thought, oh, this is going to be the end of it. But there's nothing. There is a few places that you might see a little bit of a dent or something, but there is nothing to see here. It looks used, sure it does, but no more than that. The skeg here, I have been dragging this skeg over rocks and sand and God knows what, pulling this in the latest few days at least, upstream river, before I decided to pull it off going downstream. And yeah, sure, you can see it has been used, but it's still 100% functional. And it fits perfectly here, obviously, works like a charm. You got your drain plugs, you got 7 of those, perfect when you want to drain the kayak, because you pull a lot of water in the kayak if you get in and out often, and also your paddle might pull it in. All you got to do is just put an angle to it, open the bottom plug there, and all the water comes out. If you're running Whitewater, it's fantastic. I can tell you, I've been doing class 2 rapids in this, and it works really nice. You just open the drain plugs and you run through the rapids, and the waves, they come in over you and you're totally drenched. But bloop, it won't take long. All the water more or less is totally gone. So I really, really like this kayak. It is so impressive. But I also have to say that I chose this kayak because, although I was looking at all these top 10 best kayak for this and that and this and that, Aquaglide never popped up, and it annoyed me in the beginning because I couldn't understand, why does a good kayak not pop up there? I mean, 10 best, it's got to be somewhere along there. Until I obviously realized that most of these 10 best, if not all of them, are a matter of affiliation. You click a bottom and you go to another site, you buy the kayak, and they get their commission on it. And since Aquaglide apparently don't have any association like that, well, they don't pop up on top 10. But I can tell you, without having tried some of all the other brands, I can tell you that this has to be on top 10, if not the #1, at least for my purposes. I don't know if you can see it on this video too, but when you take off the skeg, you have this a little bit like a banana shape, and because this is a 12-foot kayak, you have a kayak that maneuvers very well in rapids. If you're doing class 1, class 2, up to maybe even class 3 rapids, and you take off the skegs, you have a kayak that instantly reacts to whatever you do. Obviously, it is not as good as if you're having a hardshell kayak for that, but it is not a hardshell kayak. It is an inflatable. It is a touring kayak. So it is not supposed to be doing better than any of those. But because of that rocker, because it does shape like a banana here, it means that the center of the kayak is where you seat, and it rotates easy around it. If you put the skeg in there, then you get directional stability, and it just goes straight ahead. And I'm telling you, this kayak, you cannot flip it. I mean, you gotta have it empty and you gotta make an effort, then you can flip it. But otherwise than that, It's got a 99 centimeters wide, and that means extreme stability. Every time I get into this kayak, obviously if you're doing a hardshell kayak, you are taking one feet on the other side, and then you are letting your bottom down, and then you're lifting your feet in. That doesn't really work that easy on a kayak that's 99 centimeters broad wide, but it works like a charm just to get on the side and get your butt down, drip off your legs, swing your legs in, and you're on. And if you have just the tip of the kayak on land and you want to go on board the kayak, it's easy. You just step into it because it's so stable. You can stand upright in it, even out on open water. So yeah, guys, I really cannot say anything bad about it. But there is one bad thing. But this is just today. My drop stitch floor was deflated when I reached a top up there and I came back to it. And I didn't understand why they could, because maybe it was just because of the heat. So I tried to inflate it again, and it turns out, I'll show you. It turns out that here at the nose, right here, it turns out that the stitching, the glue, has simply come apart. I don't know why that happened, but what I can say is it's not because I've been fishing in it, it's not because hooks have hit it, or it's because of rocks hit it. It's simply after 3 years, 1 centimeter of the glue on the drop stitch floor seems to have come loose and it's deflated. So I can answer another question, and that's the question, can you paddle this one without the drop stitch floor? Because the advertising says it is optional. Do you want to use the drop stitch floor or not? Well, definitely you can. It becomes a little bit more tight because obviously when you put your bum in it, it will kind of fold in on itself. So it's a tight squeeze when you don't have the drop stitch floor. With the drop stitch floor, on the other hand, it keeps the sides apart, and you really got a lot of good room. So yeah, guys, I just thought I wanted to give you a thumbs up on something that I feel a little bit annoyed about: the lack of review of the Aquaglide. I mean, the producer, I know, is not famous for their kayaks. They're famous for their big fun parks, water parks. But I'd say if you can make something that can handle the stress of 1,000 people a day jumping around, maybe they obey by the rules, maybe not bring sharp objects and so on and so forth, and it still holds up to the task, I'm sure they can make something that is world-class in kayaks. In my 3 years, well, I can only say that is what I've experienced. I wouldn't change this for a thing. And here is also another thing. I have been training in hardshell kayaks for quite a while now, for a couple of years. And I was actually at a certain point where I thought I wanted to change my inflatable kayak for a hardshell kayak, because the hardshell kayak is just faster, it's more nimble, it's easier to paddle and stuff like that. But then I took what I was considering my last trip with my inflatable kayak, and I realized it ain't gonna happen. There is a place for inflatable kayaks and there's a place for hardshell kayaks. The inflatable kayaks is chill out, relax, enjoy your surroundings. Speed is not an issue. You do not consider speed as important, but you consider it important to bring the gear you need for a camping so that you can relax. That's what this one is for, and obviously portability. The ability to bring it along everywhere without need a car, without need anything special. It's a perfect solution. Not just for the people who's got a small apartment, but for people who really like to out there and enjoy nature. That is at least my opinion. What you think of it, that's a different story obviously. But until next time, stay curious.